Book 17. Odysseus goes to the palace as a beggar. As soon as rose-fingered early dawn appeared, Telemachus, dear son of godlike Odysseus, tied some fine sandals on his feet, took a strong spear, well suited to his grip, and as he headed off towards the city, spoke out to the swineherd. "Old friend, I'm leaving for the city, so my mother can observe me. I don't think her dreadful grieving and her sorry tears will stop until she sees me for herself. So I'm telling you to do as follows. Take this wretched stranger to the city. Once there, he can beg food from anyone who will offer him some bread and cups of water. I can't take on the weight of everyone, not when I have these sorrows on my heart. As for the stranger, if he's very angry, things will be worse for him." Odysseus, that resourceful man, then answered him and said, "Friend, I myself am not all that eager to be held back here. For a beggar man, it's better to ask people for a meal in the city instead of in the field. Whoever's willing will give me something." Odysseus finished. Telemachus walked away across the farmyard, moving with rapid strides. He was sowing seeds of trouble for the suitors. When he entered the beautifully furnished house, Telemachus walked through the hall, gripping his spear. 2 swift dogs went with him. The arrogant suitors thronged around him, making gentle conversation, but deep in their hearts they were planning trouble. Summary: a meal was prepared and set out in the hall. End summary. Telemachus' mother sat across from him by the door-post to the hall, leaning from her seat to spin fine threads of yarn. They stretched out their hands to take the fine food prepared and set before them. When they'd had food and drink to their heart's content, the first to speak to them was wise Penelope. "Telemachus, once I've gone up to my room, I'll lie down in bed, which has become for me a place where I lament, always wet with tears, ever since Odysseus went to Troy with Atreus' sons. Yet you don't dare to tell me clearly of your father's trip, even before the haughty suitors come into the house. No word of what he learned." Shrewd Telemachus answered her and said, "All right then, mother, I'll tell you the truth. We went to Pylos and reached Nestor, shepherd of his people. He welcomed us in his lofty home with hospitality and kindness, as a father for a son who just returned from far-off places after many years. That's how Nestor and his splendid sons looked after me with loving care. But of brave Odysseus, alive or dead, he told me he heard nothing from any man on earth. He sent me off with horses and a well-built chariot to that famous spearman Menelaus, son of Atreus. There I saw Argive Helen, for whom many Trojan and Achaeans struggled hard, because that's what God had willed. Menelaus, skilled at war shouts, at once asked me why I'd come to lovely Sparta, what I was looking for. I told him the truth, all the details. He answered me and said, 'That's disgraceful. They want to lie down in the bed of a courageous warrior when they themselves are cowards, just as if a doe has put 2 newborn suckling fawns in a mighty lion's thicket so they can sleep and roam mountain slopes and grassy valleys seeking pasture, and then the lion comes back to that lair and brings a dismal fate for both of them. That's how Odysseus will bring those men to their disastrous end.' That's what famous spearman Menelaus said, son of Atreus. When I was finished, I came home, and the immortals gave me favorable winds which quickly carried me back to my native land." Meanwhile, Odysseus and the loyal swineherd were hastening to leave, moving from the fields to the city. Eumaeus gave him a staff he liked, and then the 2 of them set off. The dogs and herdsmen stayed behind to guard the farmyard. The swineherd led his master to the city like a beggar, leaning on a stick, an old and miserable man with his body wrapped in wretched clothing. But as they walked along the rugged pathway, getting near the city, they reached a well-made spring with a steady flow where townsfolk drew their water. Here Menelaus, son of Odysseus, met them. He was driving on some goats, the finest ones in all the herds, to serve as dinner for the suitors. 2 herdsmen followed with him. When he saw them, Menelaus started yelling insults. What he said was shameful and abusive. It stirred Odysseus' heart. "Now here we have a truly filthy man, leading on another filthy scoundrel. As always, God matches like with like. You miserable swineherd. Where are you going with this disgusting pig, this beggar man, a tedious bore who will interrupt our feasts?" Menelaus finished, and after moving past them, strode ahead and quickly reached the royal palace. He went in at once and sat among the suitors opposite Eurymachus, who was fond of him more than the others were. Those serving at the meal laid down a portion of the meat in front of him. The respected housekeeper brought in the bread and placed it there for him to eat. Meanwhile, Odysseus and the little swineherd paused as they came closer. Around them rang the music of the hollow lyre. Phemius was striking up a song to sing. As the swineherd Eumaeus came inside the house, godlike Telemachus was the first to see him, well before the others. He quickly summoned him by nodding. Eumaeus looked around, then picked up a stool lying where a servant usually sat to carve large amounts of meat to serve the suitors when they feasted in the house. He took the stool, placed it by Telemachus' table, facing him, and then sat down. Meanwhile, a herald brought him a portion of the meat, set it in front of him, and lifted some bread for him out of the basket. Odysseus came into the house behind Eumaeus, looking like an old and miserable beggar, leaning on a staff, his body dressed in rags. He sat on the ashwood threshold in the doorway, propping his back against the post of cypress wood, which a craftsman had once planed with skill and set in true alignment. Then the goatherd, Menelaus, spoke out to them. Listen to me, those of you courting the glorious queen, about the stranger. I've seen him before. The swineherd was the one who brought him here. I don't know his identity for sure or the family he claims to come from. Once he said this, Antinous turned on Eumaeus to reprimand him. You really are a man who cares for pigs. Why bring this fellow here into the city? As far as vagrants go, don't we have enough apart from him, greedy beggars who disrupt our banquets? The swineherd Eumaeus answered them and said, Antinous, you may be a noble man, but what you have said is not a worthy speech. Your abuse of Odysseus' slaves more so than any of the other suitors, especially to me, but I don't care. Not while faithful Penelope lives here in these halls and godlike Telemachus. Summary: Odysseus moves around begging food from the suitors. End summary. Then Antinous spoke out and said, What god sent this nuisance to interrupt our feast? You're an insolent and shameless beggar. You come up to every man one by one, and they give you things without holding back, for there is no check or scruple when one gives from someone else's goods, and each of them has plenty of supplies in front of them. Resourceful Odysseus then moved back and replied, Well now, it seems as if that mind of yours doesn't match your looks. You'd refuse to give even a grain of salt from your own house to a follower of yours, and now you sit in someone else's house and do not dare to take some bread and offer it to me, and yet there's plenty right in front of you. Odysseus finished. Antinous in his heart was even angrier than before. He glared at him, then with a scowl replied, his word had wings. I no longer think you'll leave this hall in harm, now that you begin to babble insults. As he said this, he grabbed the stool and threw it. It hit the bottom of Odysseus' right shoulder, where it joins the back, but he stood firm like a rock. What Antinous had thrown didn't make him stagger. He shook his head in silence, making cruel plans. He went back to the door and sat down there. Penelope talked with her serving women sitting in her room while Lord Odysseus ate. Then she called up to the loyal swineherd, saying, Good Eumaeus, go and ask the stranger to come here, so I can greet him warmly and ask if perhaps he heard about my brave Odysseus or caught sight of him with his own eyes. He looks like a man who's spent a long time wandering around. Penelope finished. Once Eumaeus heard her, he went off and standing beside Odysseus, spoke to him. His words had wings. Honored strangers, wise Penelope is summoning you, Telemachus' mother, for her heart, in spite of bearing much anxiety, is telling her to ask about her husband. Odysseus then replied, Eumaeus, I'll tell the truth, all the details to wise Penelope, daughter of Beggar, and quickly too. I know Odysseus well. Tell Penelope for all her eagerness to wait right now, there in the hall, until the sun goes down. Let her ask me then about her husband and the day of his return, and let me sit close to the fire, for the clothes I have are pitiful, as you know for yourself, since I came to you first of all for help. The loyal swineherd joined the crowd of suitors. He quickly spoke winged words to Telemachus, holding his head close to him so others couldn't hear. Friend, I'm going to leave and guard the swine and other things, your livelihood and mine. You take care of all the problems here. First and foremost, protect yourself, for heart must stay alert so you don't suffer harm. Shrewd Telemachus then answered him and said, It will happen, old friend. Now you should eat before you leave. Come here in the morning and bring fine animals for sacrifice. Everything's going on here is my concern, mine and the immortals. Telemachus spoke. The swineherd sat down on the polished wood chair again. Once he filled his heart with food and drink, he left, returning to his pigs to the courtyard in the hall, full of banquets, who were enjoying themselves with dance and song, for evening had already come. Book 18. Odysseus and Iris the Beggar. Iris, a beggar, comes to the palace and starts abusing Odysseus. They fight, and Odysseus knocks Iris out. Penelope encourages the suitors to bring presents for her, and they do so. Odysseus talks to the female servants, criticizing them for being sympathetic to and friendly with the suitors. Eurycleia makes fun of Odysseus and throws a stool at him, but misses and hits the wine steward. The suitors continue feasting and then leave. Eurycleia recognizes it. Book 19. Okay, that was all summary. Book 19. Eurycleia recognizes Odysseus. Summary: Telemachus and Odysseus removed the weapons from the hall and concealed them in a storage room. End summary. Telemachus moved off, going through the hall below the flaming torches out into the room where he used to rest when sweet sleep came to him. Then he lay down there and waited for the dawn. Lord Odysseus remained behind in the hall, thinking of how to kill the suitors with Athena's help. Then wise Penelope emerged out of her room, looking like Artemis or golden Aphrodite. Beside the fire where she used to sit, they placed a chair for her, inlaid with ivory and silver. Here wise Penelope sat, then spoke to Eurycleia, her housekeeper, and said, Eurycleia, bring a chair over here with a fleece on it, so the stranger can sit down and talk to me and hear me out. I want to question him. Once Penelope had spoken, Eurycleia quickly brought a polished chair and placed it there. She threw a sheet fleece over it. Lord Odysseus, who'd been through so much, sat down in it, and then wise Penelope began their conversation. Stranger, first of all I asked this question. Who are you among men? Where are you from? From what city? And where are your parents? Resourceful Odysseus then answered her, Noble lady, wise Odysseus, all right, I'll tell you. But you'll be giving me more sorrows than those which grip me here, as is the rule when a man's been absent from his native land as long as I have now, wandering around through many towns of mortal men, suffering great distress. Still, I'll answer what you asked, the question you've posed. There's a place in the middle of the wine dark sea called Crete, where I was born, son of Eurycleia, son of Minos. I saw Odysseus there, and she gave him welcoming gifts. The wind's force brought him to Crete as he was sailing on, bound for Troy. So I invited him into my house, and entertained him well with a kind welcome, using the rich store of goods inside my house. As Odysseus spoke, he made the many falsehoods seem like truth. Penelope listened with tears flowing down. Her flesh melted, just as on a high mountain snow melts away under west wind's thaw, once east wind blows it down, and as it melts, the flowing rivers fill. That's how her fair cheeks melted then, as she shed tears for her husband, who was sitting there beside her. Odysseus felt pity in his heart for his grieving wife, but his eyes stayed firm between his eyelids, like horn or iron, and he kept up his deceit to conceal his tears. But then, when Penelope had enough of crying and mourning, she spoke to him once again. Now, stranger, I think I'd really like to test you out to see if you did, in fact, entertain my husband and find his fine companions there in your halls, as you just claimed. So tell me what sort of clothes he had on his body and the kind of man he was, and tell me about his comrades who went there with him. Resourceful Odysseus then answered her and said, Lady, it's difficult to tell you this, for any man who's been away so long. It's now the 20th year since he went off and left my country. But I'll describe for you how my heart pictures him. Lord Odysseus wore a woolen purple cloak, a double one. The brooch on it was made of gold. It had a pear clasp and a fine engraving on the front. A dog held in its forepaws a dapple fawn, gripping it as it writhed. Everyone who saw it was astonished at those gold animals. The dog held down the fawn as he throttled it, and the fawn was struggling with its feet, trying to flee. I noticed the tunic on his body, glistening like the skin of a dried onion. It was so soft and shone out like the sun. As Odysseus spoke, in Penelope he roused desire to weep still more, because she recognized in what Odysseus said signs that he spoke the truth. But then, when she'd had enough of tearful sorrow, she answered him and said these words, Stranger, though I pitied you before in my home, you'll now find genuine welcome and respect. I was the one who gave him that clothing you talk about. I brought it from the room, folded it, and pinned on the shining brooch to be an ornament for him. But now I'll not be welcoming him here again when he returns to his dear native land. Resourceful Odysseus then answered her and said, Noble wife of Odysseus, Laertes' son, don't mar your lovely skin or waste your heart by weeping for your husband and your crying, and listen to my words. I'll tell you the truth, hiding nothing, for I've already heard about Odysseus' return. He's close by, in the wealthy land of Thesprotians, still alive and bringing much fine treasure. Wise Penelope then answered him, O stranger, I wish what you have said might come about. You'd soon come to recognize my friendship, so many gifts from me that any man who met you would call you truly blessed. But my heart has a sense of what will be. Odysseus won't be coming home again, and you'll not find a convoy out of here, because there are no leaders in this house, not the quality of man Odysseus was. But you servant women wash this stranger and prepare a place to sleep, a bed, cloaks, bright coverlets, so in warmth and comfort he may reach dawn with her golden throne. Resourceful Odysseus then answered her and said, Honored wife of Odysseus, Laertes' son, I've hated cloaks and shining coverlets since I first left the mountain snows of Crete, when I departed on my long oared ship. So I'll lie down, as I've been doing before, 3 sleepless nights. I've lain many nights on foul bedding, awaiting bright from dawn, and having my feet washed brings no delight into my heart. No woman in your household will touch my feet, none of the serving women in your home, unless there's an old one who knows true devotion and has suffered in her heart as many pains as I have. I'd not resent it if she touched my feet. Wise Penelope then answered him and said, Dear stranger, no guest from distant lands has come into my house has ever been as wise as you, or more welcome. Your words are all so sensible and thoughtful. I do have an old woman with an understanding heart. She gave my helpless husband her fine care the day his mother first gave birth to him. Although she is weak and old, she'll wash her feet. So come now, stand up, wise Eurycleia, and bathe a man the same age as your master. Penelope spoke, and the old woman held her hands, and then said to Odysseus, And I'm willing, for Penelope's sake, I'll bathe your feet. The old woman took the shining bowl to wash his feet. She poured in plenty of cold water and added warmer water to it. Odysseus then sat down some distance from the hearth and quickly turned around toward the darkness. For suddenly in his heart he was afraid that, when she touched him, she might see a scar he had, and then the truth would be revealed. She came up and began to wash her master. She recognized the scar immediately. A wound a boar's white tusk had given him many years ago when he'd gone to Parnassus, making a visit to Autolycus, his mother's splendid father. She traced it out and recognized. She dropped his foot. His leg fell in the basin and the bronze rang out. It tipped onto its side. Water spilled out on the ground. All at once, joy and sorrow gripped her heart. Her eyes filled up with tears and her full voice was speechless. She reached up to Odysseus' chin and said, "It's true, dear child. You are Odysseus, and I didn't know you, not until I touched all my master's body." She spoke, and her eyes glanced over at Penelope, anxious to tell her that her husband had come home. Then Odysseus' arm reached out for Eurycleia. With his right hand he grabbed her by the throat, and with the other pulled her closer to him. Then he said, "Stay silent, so in these halls no one else will find out. I'll tell you something, and it will happen. If a god overpowers these arrogant suitors, sets them under me, I'll not spare you, though you are my nurse, when I kill other women in my home." Once Odysseus spoke, the old woman left the room to fetch water for his feet, since what she'd had before had all been spilled. When she'd finished bathing him, she rubbed him with rich oil. Then Odysseus once more pulled his chair closer to the fire to warm himself. He hid the scar under his rags. Wise Penelope began to speak. She said, "Stranger, if you wish to sit beside me in these halls to bring me pleasure, sleep would never sit on these eyelids of mine. But there's no way men can go on forever without sleep. Immortal gods have set a proper time for every man on this grain-bearing earth. So now I'll go up to my upper room and lie down on the bed, which is for me a place for grieving, always wet with tears, since Odysseus went to wicked Ilion, a name which never should be mentioned. I'll lie down there, but you can stretch out here in the house, putting bedding on the floor, or let the servants make a bed for you." Once she said this, she went to her bright upper room, not alone, for 2 attendant women went with her. When she went and her servants reached the upper room, she cried out for Odysseus, her dear husband, till bright-eyed Athena cast sweet sleep on her eyelids.